Hey everyone,
Hi.
welcome back. So we have Vanessa here, and we did a segment talking about Melody and Madison and her twins, and just talking about hope despite. And this series today is about learning to live despite, because Vanessa has an amazing story. And again, I walk kind of through watching and just watching them go through it, and talking about Anton. I wanted you to share kind of how you found him, why you found him, and everything that happened after that.
Okay, so you'll have to watch the Melody Madison story because they're a big part of Anton's story. So the short version of the story, I got married in 2005. We had a perfectly healthy child in 2006. Found out we were pregnant in 2008 with conjoined twins who lived an hour after birth. So that's Melody and Madison's story. You'll have to go back to the other segment to hear more about them. And then we had our son Judah, who was totally healthy a year after they had passed away, maybe a year and 2 months. But when they delivered, I had to have a C-section with the twins, and I had a C-section with Judah. So I had a giant window on my uterus. So it looked like pink, fleshy uterus, and then it looked like saran wrap, and you could see his head. And so really at any time, my uterus could have ruptured, and he could have died, and I could have died. And so we were like done with biological children. We had always wanted to adopt. And then because of our experience with the twins, we thought, you know, we would really like to adopt a kid with special needs. And we thought more heart issues, because that's what they had. And so I thought, well, we should really wait, you know, until Judah's 2, because I figured there would be some hospital time involved, and just didn't want to leave our baby for, you know, our new baby. So kind of wrestled with the idea of adoption while raising our rainbow baby, and the boys were about a year old, and I say boys because I found Anton on Facebook around this time, and I am the person that everybody gets annoyed by, right? Like, I'm on Facebook, and then I delete it because I'm addicted, and then like I make this big announcement, and then I get back on Facebook, and then I delete it, right? So my Facebook was deleted, but I remember I have a friend who had sent me her number, and I needed to give it to somebody else. So I need to slow down because I'm talking really fast. So I got on Facebook to get her number, and this little boy popped up in my newsfeed. And a few days before that, it was just so heavy on my heart, adoption, and I thought, no, we're going to wait until Judah's 2. We're not adopting right now. And then I kept thinking, like, oh, I'd really like to adopt somebody that's the exact same age as Judah. And I thought that'll never happen. Like, maybe they'll be, you know, a couple days apart. And then I'm like, no, because that would make birthdays weird. I want them the exact same age. And so just wrestling with adoption and all of these things. So I get on Facebook, and this little boy pops up in my newsfeed, right, Anton. And his story is he was born in Russia out of a surrogate pregnancy, and he's a twin. And when the boys were born, the biological parents took the healthy twin and left Anton. And he was born with a genetic skin disorder called epidermolysis bullosa. So basically he was missing collagen 7, which is what holds your skin together. It's like the Velcro or the glue that holds it together. And so his whole top layer of skin was floating. So any friction would literally cause his skin to come off. And what we knew at the time is he was just swaddled in a hospital, being fed with an NG tube, and I am bawling because I had my rainbow baby, and I'm nursing him to sleep, you know, and I just thought, like, there's a baby on the other side of the world, right? The cool thing is Anton and Judah are the exact same age. They have the same birthday. Like, it's everything that I had been thinking, right? Like,
Wanting.
Like, right, yeah. And those thoughts did not come from me because, I mean, who would think that? And so I just thought, this is my son. Like, we have to go get him. This is my son, and he is being neglected, and I need him. And so I just thought, Jason's never going to go for this. Like, $40,000 adoption in Russia, and the kid's skin comes off. Like, this is not going to happen. So I just prayed about it for like 15 minutes before I could call Jason, and I have a very strong personality, and I usually can beg and plead and whatever. And I just thought, you know, if he says no, I told the Lord, like, I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to ever bring it up again. And so when I could, I called him and I said, okay, like, here's his story, you know, and I'm bawling, and this is how much the adoption costs, and this is the disorder he has. But backing up a little bit to the Facebook thing, in 2008, blogging was huge. And so I had followed the blogs of several women who had lost babies, and they called themselves the Brown Shirt Mamas. I think there was like 8 of them who had lost babies the same year that we lost Melody and Madison. And so one of them had lost a baby. He was stillborn, Gabriel, and she went on to have another child who had epidermolysis bullosa. And so I'd followed her blog, but I didn't know her, right? So one of the other Brown Shirt Mamas, Christy, was a really good friend of mine, and we, you know, talked through Facebook and all of that. And so Christy shared Patrice's post about Anton. So because we had lost the twins in 2008, because I had blogged, because all of these mamas blogged, Christy and Patrice were friends. I was friends with Christy, and that's how I found Anton, right? So did God let Melody and Madison die so I'd find Anton? Absolutely not. Like, I don't believe that for a second. But he used that, right? He used something that was really bad and tragic for something good in my life and for his glory. So he took all of these losses and brought a kid home because of it. And so Christy had posted, you know, Anton's story on Facebook, fell in love with him, so back to Jason. So I'm telling him all these things, right? And I'm like, he's going to say no. And so when I told him, I'm like, don't say anything. I'm going to tell you all these things, and then I'll listen to what you say. Right. And so I told him everything. I said, okay, what do you think? And he was like, well, we've always wanted to adopt. Let's go for it. I mean, it was that simple. Like, there wasn't a moment of stopping. There wasn't a question. I got off the phone with him and immediately started calling adoption agencies. And, you know, Reese's Rainbow had him listed on their website. I'm, like, desperately working to get this child. So Reese's Rainbow said we couldn't adopt him because we didn't have experience with EB. And so I immediately got a hold of Patrice, the one whose Gabriel had passed away and then Jonah had EB, and said, like, I know I don't know you. Or actually, I had messaged Patrice and Christy both and said, they're not going to let us adopt him. I don't have experience with EB. And Patrice said, if he is yours, fight for him. And I said, okay. Like, will
you help me?
Yeah, exactly. I said, well, can I come stay with you for a week and can you train me? Like, I don't know this person. I flew to North Carolina for a week and she trained me on dressing change and just everything, medical, G2, the whole experience, the whole thing, like for a week, right? And while we were there, they let us commit to his adoption because they were like, oh, they're serious. Yeah.
What was that like when you were experiencing the reality of the illness? So, did you ever have that moment where you're like,
So when I was following her blog, there was a couple times where I was like, oh, I got to get off here because this is intense. But being with Jonah in real life, it just was motivating. There was never a moment of like, this is a lot. It was like, teach me everything. I need to bring my kid home. So imagine like somebody kidnapping your kid, taking them to Russia, and they're being neglected. You're like, do whatever to get them, right?
You just knew in your heart.
So being there was just super like, let's do it.
And people who have adopted say that. I know I say that. Like, I think Kara was literally born in my heart before she was even here. Like, you just know.
He's my child. I saw him and I'm like, this is my child. Never felt like that since. Like, I just knew. And so we started working, I mean, honestly, like the day we found him and were able to bring him home 13 months later. The really cool part of his story is he was in a really bad hospital for like the first year of his life, and then some Russian volunteers found him in the federal database, and they paid to move him to a better hospital. They paid for a nanny for him, so he basically had a mom. Like, he had somebody there taking care of him 24/7. They loved him and took care of him, and since then, there's really no special needs in Russia. Basically, if you have a child who's born with special needs, you put them in an orphanage and tell people your baby died. There was no wheelchair ramps. Like, we went to Russia 3 times to be able to bring him home. Once to commit to the adoption, the second time for court, and then the third time to bring him home. And there, you don't see anybody with special needs ever. And so for them to take such good care of him was such a huge blessing. Absolutely. And when we brought him home, it just made him transitioning into our home so much easier. So yeah, we brought him home from Russia, and he was amazing. We brought him home when he was 2, right? Remember I said I wanted to wait till the boys were 2. They were the exact same age. He came home when he was 2. He is a twin, and we lost twins, and now he and Judah are the same age. Like, it's just such a neat, but only God could write a story this beautiful, right? And he was amazing. Like, he learned his ABCs before Judah, and I mean, just like thrived.
Well, because there was a language barrier. He only knew Russian,
right?
And then he comes to home with you, and he's learning.
Yes, so we taught him like baby sign language right away, and he just said, I love you within 2 weeks. Like, cutest little thing ever. So because of his disorder, he was in and out of the hospital all the time. I mean, constantly had infections. It's comparable to 3rd-degree burns. He was covered in bandages from his neck down. And so I just really feel like God made me to be his mom, right? Like, I thrive on medical stuff. I don't get stressed out. We would do 2 to 3 hour dressing changes to change his bandages every day, every other day. This became our life. Like, and
talk a little bit about that, because I've watched several documentaries about EB after I heard about Anton, and one of them actually showed an entire dressing change, and it's intense. I mean, because everything you're doing to help them is hurting them.
Yes, absolutely. So we tortured him to keep him alive, is what I say. So it's burn bandages, literally from the neck down. So you have to take all of those off. So then imagine when an open wound is exposed to air, it burns. And then I stick him in water and it burns. And then I had to bathe him with like Hepiclins, sometimes bleach baths to kill staph, sometimes vinegar to kill Pseudomonas. I mean, just torturing this child to keep him alive. And then take him back to the room very carefully because he didn't have any bandages on, and then rebandage his whole body. And so the bandages protected his skin from infections, but then it also acted as his skin. He would wake up in the morning and he had just rubbed his nose and all the skin came off. Or if we picked him up wrong, like we've ripped all the skin off of his side before. I mean, it's just floating, like nothing is attaching it. It was really neat. Judah was 2 when we brought him home, and Kenya was 5, and they were amazing with him. Like even all growing up, they would all say that Anton was their favorite. Like, so Judah and Anton were little best friends. Like they would hold hands falling asleep. It was just really neat to see God just immediately create, you know, family.
That family,
And so we brought him home when he was 2. And then when he was 5, we took him to Minnesota for a bone marrow transplant. It's the only place in the world doing bone marrow transplants for EB. That's short for the condition he had. And basically, the theory is he does chemo and radiation. They wipe out all of his blood-making cells, give him donor cells. He starts growing collagen 7 and his skin gets tougher. It's not a cure. It's just to improve quality of life. Right. And so within 30 days, he was 100% donor. His skin was so much tougher. He never lost the skin off his nose. He used to wake up with corneal abrasions because his eyes would get dry at night. And when he'd open them, he would just tear that first layer of his eye.
Oh my goodness.
Horrible. And so then he couldn't open his eyes for days. That never happened again. We hardly had bandages on him. He only had a couple wounds. Like,
wow.
He did the best out of anybody ever on the transplant for EB. But he was super medically fragile going into it. After transplant, if they have a fever of 100.3 or 4, I can't remember, it's an automatic admission to the hospital. Well, even before transplant, that child could run a fever just because it's fun. Like, nothing had to be wrong. He just ran fevers. So for the majority, we got there in March of 2015. He was 5. Until December of 2015, he spent the majority of that time inpatient in the hospital. There was a couple weeks where, you know, he was out, but it was like a couple days at a time. And then he was immediately readmitted. He had tons of blood infections, skin infections. He had to be, oh gosh, what is it called? I don't know. Anyways, surgeries and circumcised, like all kinds of crazy procedures had to happen while we were there just because of infection and inflammation. And it was a rough journey medically. I was sharing with her earlier, for me, the experience was actually overall a positive one. Anton's super easy kid. He is funny and hilarious, and if you go to the Help Anton page on Facebook and look at videos of him, I mean, he was just like full of personality. And he went to bed at 9 o'clock, and so I'd order food and hang out with the nurses and just made everyone my friend. Because I'm like, if I'm going to be in the hospital for 10 months, like we are hanging out. And so
when you had help, you weren't doing it all by yourself.
So I did the dressing changes, but they were feeding him and doing his medicine, and so it was almost like a break for me. The medical stuff was hard, like watching him go to surgery. Because of his skin condition, I went into the OR every single time with him. I secured PICC lines, I took the dressings off, I unwrapped him and rebandaged him. So as a parent, right, like you would think this would be super intense, but I just turned it off. Like I went into, you know, nurse mode. This is what we're doing to keep you alive, basically. And so I feel like God really created me for that because I didn't enjoy hurting him and I didn't enjoy that he was sick, but I really enjoyed taking care of him. And so towards the end of 2015, Anton developed intussusception, which is basically where their stomach turns into itself and dies. And they have 2 hours to do surgery, and they didn't find out for like 3 days. And so by the time they found out, it had telescoped like all the way to his rectum. And so they had tried like a less invasive procedure to fix it, and it didn't work. And so they did emergency surgery, and going into it, we thought like he was going to come out with a colostomy bag, which would have been horrible because it's tape on the skin, the stools on the skin. He would get infections. He was resistant to every antibiotic there was at this point. And so they were like, it's just a matter of time before this kills him. And I said, you know, he was healthy a couple hours ago. You're going to do this. Like, fix it. And God was so gracious. Like, he came out. They took out half of his large intestines or small. Not sure. I think it was large. Took out his colon, and he did not have a colostomy bag. And was pooping within, you know, like a day or two. And so it was such an answer to prayer. And then about a week later, it all came apart. And there was just nothing else that they could do for him. And even in that, like, God was so gracious because we knew for 5 days that he wasn't going to make it. And so we had moved our whole family to Minnesota, and my husband and our other 2 children stayed at the Ronald McDonald House and kind of went back and forth to the hospital. And there was a 1-room schoolhouse in the Ronald McDonald House, so that's where our kids went to school. And
it was right before Christmas.
Right before Christmas. Yeah. So some random, I shouldn't say random, but some people that followed his Facebook page brought us a Christmas gift. I had no idea they were coming, and it was so sweet. And I thought, we should do Christmas early. Yeah. And so Jason and his Jason's mom and his uncle went to the Ronald McDonald House, got all of our Christmas decorations because we hadn't put them up yet. I posted on his Facebook page like, hey, we're going to do Christmas early. If you want to bring gifts, you know, drop them off at the security desk, or you can call the hospital gift shop to buy gifts. A ton of people back home wanted to donate money, so we opened a account, whatever it is, PayPal or GoFundMe or whatever. So within an hour, we had hundreds of gifts, like $2,500 in the account.
It was a room full.
Yeah. So we like shut it all down. We were like, thanks, we'll post pictures later. Sprinkles the elf came and did this amazing Christmas celebration. And we did our traditional, like, we sang hymns and we read the Christmas story. Well, we asked him to text Paige the whole hospital, because at this point, we have been here for 10 months. Like, these people became our family.
Yes.
And so you could not walk in his room. Like, it was full of people, like, singing hymns and Christmas songs, and it was so beautiful. Like, we opened gifts, and Anton decorated a tree, and so he passed away on the 15th, and I think this was a couple days before that. And so, you know, we got to do Christmas with him early. We all stayed the night at the hospital. They brought extra beds in there for us. Judah and Kenya stayed with us in the hospital. So, worst experience ever, but also the most amazing, because we knew and we made memories and we loved on him, and I slept with him, and Judah got to sleep with him, and, you know, family got to come say bye. And
I think sometimes too, in processing grief, is when you know that you're going to have to say goodbye. You know, I recently, with my brother, he passed away, and we had 14 days. They told us 7 to 14 days. And so when you know you have that you're all of a sudden, you know, your days are numbered, you know, your time's numbered, but when you know a number, then it changes things.
Changes everything.
Yeah.
It changes everything.
But it's amazing how much peace and beauty came out of
knowing.
Yeah. Because he was at this point, how old was he? He was 8, 7?
5. Almost 6.
Okay.
Almost 6.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we, you know, just made lots of memories with him, and I just thought, you know, because they'd asked us, like, what do you want this to look like? Do you want no visitors? And I'm like, no, like, these people have become our family. We had an open door policy, like, the people who drew his blood, the pharmacy people, like, everybody, it was constant, in and out all day, loving on him, saying goodbye to him. And it was so beautiful to see, like, all of these people who he had touched their lives, and they just said, let us know, and we'll put a sign on the door. And there was never one point where I was like, nobody else. Yeah. Because I felt like he was all of ours, right? Yeah. And so I asked a surgeon, tell me what this is going to look like. I need to know. In the hall, of course. We didn't talk about this in front of Anton. And he said, in a healthy person, within one shift change, he would slip into a coma, and within the next, he would pass away, right? And this was on day, like, 2 or 3. And so then the next day, Dr. Holly walked in the room, and Jason said, good morning, Dr. Holly, Merry Christmas. And he about fell out. I mean, Anton was... Oh, my goodness. So everything had came apart, stools pouring into his intestines, infection is running rapid, and this child's talking to people and alert and awake. And we had gotten really close to Kyle Rudolph from the Minnesota Vikings, and so he came up and hung out with us and gave Anton his Pro Bowl jersey and brought us breakfast. And I mean, it was just really a beautiful time, right? And so in my brain, the way I wanted this to go was I just wanted it to be Jason and I wasn't going to say that. I wasn't going to force it, because I didn't want to look back on this with any regret and think like, oh, that's not how I wanted it, or whatever. And so this is day 5, and Judah's 5, and Kenya's 8, and they've been in the hospital for 5 days straight, and they haven't gone outside. And so we just asked Jason's parents, like, hey, can you take them back to the Ronald McDonald House and just let them be kids?
Right.
And for the first time, literally in 5 days, we were alone, and within like an hour he had passed away. And so his doctor was in the room, and his, you know, stats started dropping, and she's like, I'm gonna go ahead and go. And I'm like, okay, don't let anybody come in, you know. And he yeah, I mean, it was just us. And so that was definitely the hardest moment of my life. I knew it was coming, and I kind of threw off all the monitors because I didn't want to see it happen. And, you know, I was right beside him, and it was hard. I mean, you know, I knew he'd stopped breathing, and I told Jason, like, give me the stethoscope. And so honestly, the most powerful and most defining moment of my life, like, I stuck a stethoscope to his chest, and it was the loudest, most awful sound I'd ever heard. Like, complete silence, like complete hollow. And he was gone. And, you know, everything changed in that moment. Like, my identity had been wrapped up. And yes, I was Kenny and Judah's mom too, but everything we did was revolved around Anton's care, and all of a sudden that was gone, right? And so we just held him and loved him and sang to him, and doctors came and said bye to him. And, you know, when we found out he was going to pass away, we stopped doing dressing changes because I said, I'm not doing this. In 5 days, if anybody has a kid with EB, 5 days is a long time to not do dressing change. Usually they're weepy, they're stinking, like none of that happened. And so it was really important to me to change his dressings before they took him. And so, you know, we loved on him for hours, and the kids came up and said bye. And then it was just us, and we did a dressing change, and I asked his nurse to stay with him, and we left him in his hospital room. And, you know, it was a hard moment, but that's where we lived. Like, that's where he was safe, and that's where his family, you know, was. And I felt okay leaving him there. Probably the second hardest moment was they flew his body to Texas before we came to Texas, and I thought this is the first time in his life that he's away from his mom. So there were some really hard moments. And then after that, it has been 3 years. It was December 15th, 2015 that he passed away. And there's a quote that I saw from Call the Midwife, and I'm probably going to butcher it. But it basically said, like, live until you feel alive again. And that has been my last 3 years. Like, I have just kept living. You know, I talked about with Melody Madison, like, when somebody dies, a part of you dies. And a huge part of me died when Anton died. I mean, my role as his caregiver, you know, I mean, hours of my week were spent caring for him. And I'm like, what?
Now what I do?
We'd been in Minnesota for so long. Like, I did not know my kids anymore. Like, I didn't know what Kenny liked, and I didn't know what Judah liked. And I had been away from my husband for 10 months. And so coming back together, I was like, I don't know these people, you know, and I had to get to know them again.
And you're going through grief. And
then I'm mourning the loss of my son. And then my hardest time of day was nighttime. Going to sleep was the worst. And that was Kenny and Judah's hardest time of day. And so it was like, and I'm, you know, I'm comforting them when all I want to do is be alone and deal with my own grief. And so it was really hard. I would say probably the first, well, until recently, like, I lived by that. Like, just live until you feel alive again and just go through the motions. There was a time that I just got super depressed and I wanted to kill myself. And I would go to work and just come home and, like, hide in my room. I couldn't even get out of bed except to go to work. It was horrible. And I would just encourage anyone, if, you know, you're having thoughts of suicide or any of those things, call the National Suicide Hotline, right? Like, they can talk you through it. It doesn't mean that they're going to commit you. I just needed to be on medication. Like, I could not at this point handle my
everything.
And so I got on anti-anxiety medicine, anti-depression medicine, and it helped a ton. And then I started living again. Like, and you don't see it coming. It went from, I didn't start living again, I was alive again. That whole time I was living, but I was not alive. And at one point I was like, wait, like, that was joy. Like, I had not felt joy in 3 years. Like, none. I faked it, I smiled, I hung out with friends. Like, I was not happy.
I love that line. But for me, when she passed away, you know, I had gone in the hospital right after our baby shower. And so my parents went to the house. There was still gifts that were unopened in her room. They threw everything in her room, like any sign of baby, threw it in her room and closed those doors. So when I got to the house, you know, I refused to go in that room because it was too hard. But I remember that song, I think it's Garth Brooks, this learning to live again is killing me. And I remember every time I would, you know, I had a C-section also, so it would take me forever to get up. And I remember that verse, this learning to live again is killing me, over and over and over in my head. And I thought, I'm going to die soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Because this learning to live again, I'm surely going to die in learning to live again.
Right. And I always say, just fake it till you make it, right? It sounds like the worst advice ever, but it's true. I had kids I had to take care of. I had to pretend.
Life continues.
To love them. You know, I did love them, but I had to go through the motions. I had to feed them. I had, you don't have a choice. Like, and so at some point, I felt alive again. And it is a beautiful place to be. And that does not mean that I don't miss Anton. There was so much trauma wrapped up in caring for him that I didn't know. Like, I had PTSD super bad after he passed away. And I had no idea. Because we tortured him to keep him alive, right? And that's just what you do. Like, I knew my child was going to die for 5 days, and I think I cried on the second day, and that was it. Like, I just loved him and was strong for him. I mean, I saw, like, his incision opened up and stool was coming out of the front of his stomach, right? And I didn't process that. And so after he died, I just shut down. Like, I didn't miss him. I didn't think about him. if I thought about him, all I could think about was EB, and I was like, I don't want any part of it.
Yeah.
And it was horrific. Like,
Yeah.
I felt like the worst person ever. And then after 3 years, all of my dreams were medical staff killing him, all of them. Like, I was running away with him. I was trying to keep him safe. Like, there was never a dream where I was just loving on him. And so within about 3 years, it turned, and I started having dreams where, you know, he'd just been gone, and I was like, hey, where have you been? Like, get over here with your mom. And he would, like, run in my arms, and I would hold him, and, like, he was fully bandaged, right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, you know, I remember picking him up, like, I had to pick him up and put him on my hip, and I've had probably 5 or 6 of those dreams, and everything changed when I started having those dreams, and then I started missing him.
Right.
And so, honestly, I feel like after 3 years, my journey of grief has just started. Like, the mourning has just started, because my brain couldn't process it before, right? And so when I say, like, let your journey be your journey, don't compare yourself to people. I mean, I posted about Anton, like, I loved him, I kind of missed him, but I have not started mourning him until now because my heart couldn't process it, right? And so I'm just at this really neat place now where I feel alive again. There is joy, but then there's also mourning. Like, I miss him, and I wish he was here. And, you know, one comforting thing was he's not in pain anymore, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I love him. Like, I wouldn't bring him back in a million years for him to suffer, but good grief, I miss him. Like, so, you know, when people try to comfort us and say, like, well, they're not suffering anymore, you want to punch them in the face.
Yeah.
Like, he's my child, and he is not here. Like, you saying he's not suffering anymore is not comforting.
No.
So my advice to people who are trying to comfort a friend is just say you're sorry. Just be there. Just hold space. Like, just sitting, just bringing food.
Listen.
I couldn't talk. I couldn't, like, form a conversation. And so,
I had friends that came to my house and they just sat. And I remember I had a rocking chair, and I had old wood floors. It was an old farmhouse. And I would literally was sitting there, and I'd hear them rocking on the chair, and they would just sit for like 20 or 30 minutes with me. And they'll never know how much that meant to me.
Yes.
You know, how precious that was to me, that they were just willing to just sit and be. And they didn't give me the lines. Right? The lines are awful, you know.
Don't do it.
You know, don't do it. Please. From 2 bereaved mothers, don't do it. Don't say the lines.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when it got really bad, I would just describe my depression as, I feel like I'm in the middle of the ocean and waves are just washing over me. And when it was less bad, I could see land. But most of the time, there was no land. And I just thought, like, this is going to overcome me. It's going to overwhelm me. And recently, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I was washing the dishes, and the song Oceans by Hillsong kept popping up in my head. And I don't listen to the song. It's not a song I typically listen to. And I thought, I should really go listen to that song. And it described my depression so perfectly. And I should pull up the lyrics. But basically what it says, like, is, in oceans deep, my faith will stand. Like, I will call upon your name. And my feet may fail. I need to pull up the lyrics.
Yeah,
talk for a second. Let me pull up the lyrics, because this is important.
Yeah, I love that song. When I first heard it, and I literally fell apart, because I was like, this is absolutely, I think it says, take me deeper than my faith could ever wander. Absolutely. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, Lord, you know.
Yeah, so this is how I've described my depression, right? And the song pops in my head, and so I just go listen to it in the bathroom at work. Well, I nanny for triplets, who are the most cute things ever. Anyways, so I'm weeping. So this is what it says. You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where my feet may fail, and there I find you in the mystery. In oceans deep, my faith will stand. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours and you are mine. Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Where feet may fail and fear surrounds me, you've never failed and you won't start now. So I'll call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waters. So I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours and you are mine. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters, wherever you would call me, and take me deeper than my feet could ever wander. And so the reason this was such a big deal to me is because I was so angry with God. Not because Anton died. Like, we knew that he was going to die when he was 12-ish. Like, he did not have a long life expectancy. And so I knew he was going to die. I think it was just all the trauma and everything leading up to it, and the PTSD. I was so angry with God. And after losing Melody and Madison and losing Anton, I felt like I was responsible for keeping Kenny and Jude alive. So I didn't let the grandparents travel with them. They had to be with me all the time. I was the only one who could keep them safe, right? There was no trust in God. Like, before that, I just God is sovereign and I trusted. And after that, I'm like, screw it. Like, I have to keep everybody alive, which is stupid, right? But that's what I did.
You're processing.
Yeah. And so then this song, I realized, like, the next day I had this vision. It wasn't really a vision, but kind of a vision, right? And I'm in the middle of the ocean, and God is surrounding me, and I don't see God, but I feel his presence, right? And I realized God called me to that ocean. It wasn't Satan. Satan's not ruining my life, and I'm about to die, and I'm overwhelmed by the waves. Like, God called me to that ocean, and he left me there, although he was with me, until I trusted him again. I didn't trust God. And he surrounded me, and he didn't let the waves overtake me. Sometimes they overwhelmed me, but they didn't I didn't die. They didn't overcome me. My feet failed, but he held me, right? I was safe in his embrace, but he left me there until I trusted him. And it was at that moment that I was able to completely surrender and say, you did this. Like, you called me to this ocean, and you held me here until I could trust you again. And God forbid something happens to my other children or this horrible life tragedy, but you will hold me in your embrace until I'm okay again. And I just released it. Like, I was able to trust God again, and I was able to say, okay, like, I love you, and I do trust you, and you're a good father. Like, you didn't call me to this place to destroy me. You called me here to grow my faith and for it to be deeper in you. And yes, losing Anton was horrible, and losing Melody and Madison was horrible, but God used that, right, for me to truly trust him. Like, it's really easy to say you trust God when you're not going through tragedy, but like Job said, right, blessed be the name of the Lord who gives and takes away. The Holy Spirit allowed him to say that, because nobody can say that, right?
When he had lost, he had lost everything. He was in pain. He was in anguish. Everything was gone. No one has lost. And there's been times I feel like Job, but I don't ever want to understand Job.
Absolutely.
I think too. I just lost my thought. You were saying about, I lost my thought. But I think in any kind of loss, in any kind of journey, is trusting him. Yes. That's what it was. That the part where I finally realized that my moment, kind of like your ocean moment, I think for me it was my friend moment. That I remember for a long time, I was like, you are not a friend of mine. You will be my God, you will be my Lord, you will be my king, but you're not going to be my friend, because friends don't do this to friends. And so learning to allow God to be my friend again was my journey. And saying, okay, you can be my friend, because to me, friendships are sacred. I have a very small, a lot of people know me, but very people know me. And I have a very small little circle. And is that trust?
Yeah, mine was trust. I don't trust deeply many people, and I had lost my trust in God. Like, how could you put me through this? Like, how could you take my son?
Right.
So it's
when
incredible.
I think as Christians, we kind of program ourselves in this faith journey to say, the Bible says to hope until the end. And so whatever the situation looks like, we continue to hold on to hope, and we want to be that miracle.
Right.
I remember with my Kriya that when she was born is when we realized how sick she was, and that they took her into surgery, and she was in there for 6 hours, and they came out and just gave us this list of stuff and said, she's not well. And when she passed away, the next day, I remember talking to God, and I said, there was a lot of people watching, and if you had done a miracle, you would have been glorified. Like, people would be like, wow, she's a real-time miracle, and like, this God really lives. And I remember hearing the Spirit say, I will be glorified in your response.
Absolutely.
And that's where his glory was, and where it has been, and it's that living despite. Right? That's where the whole believe despite message was really birthed for me. And for you, it's been learning to live despite, because now you have to find a new identity.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
As Vanessa.
Absolutely. And that doesn't happen, right, in our own time. Like, I didn't wake up one day and go, I'm going to trust God. I had no trust in God. And he restored that to me in his timing, right? And I learned a ton through that. And I don't want to ever go back to that place, but I'm thankful for that place. And so if you're in a hard place, it is okay. Like, you have not arrived. You are not going to arrive. God will carry you through it. He will, like hers was the friendship, mine was the trust. Like, he will do what he's going to do in his timing, right? And to us, we're just these finite creatures, and we question God who created everything with his voice, right? And we really can trust him. Like, you really can trust that he's going to carry you through this in his timing and for his glory. But like we said with the Melody Madison video, like, he can handle the big things. Like, I was so afraid to be angry with God, because I thought, then I'm not trusting him, and then I'm in sin, and then you know, like it's going to ruin my relationship with God. And but he can handle it. Like he created me. He has these big feelings, right?
He made us emotional beings.
And so I just had to get to a place where I could be okay feeling what I was feeling towards God, and know that if I was truly a Christian, right, that he was going to carry me through the end. Like this was not going to wreck my faith. I was going to go through a valley. But it was not going to wreck my faith. Like if I truly was a Christian, God was going to carry me through this, and I was allowed to just be at that place of not trust and be at that place of angry. And I'm not there anymore, and I'm so thankful. So yeah, I had to learn to live despite, right? And that Call the Midwife quote, you know, live until you're alive again. Like after 3+ years, like I can truly say I'm alive again. Like I am enjoying life. I'm enjoying my children. I'm enjoying my career. I'm enjoying all of these things that I was just going through the motions, right? Like being alive, like I'm truly alive, getting to experience these things and experience joy that comes from the Holy Spirit and from, you know, God healing. And
I think it's that you allowed, you know, I say all the time, allow the moments. Allow grief its place. Allow anger its place. Allow joy its place. That's the thing, is when you have trauma and these tragedies happen, sometimes we don't allow ourselves or give ourselves permission to be happy. It's like we feel bad, like I shouldn't be happy, you know, this is going on. You know, right now I think for me, my journey is watching my parents go through their grief after my brothers passed away, because it's their son, you know, it was 43 years. And so having to be on the outside, it's easy, one thing when it's your own grief, but it's another when it's someone who loves grief. And so I feel sometimes guilty to allow myself any kind of joy, because it's like, well, they're grieving and I should be grieving, and I'm not grieving the same way. That's the other thing, is my grief is different. And so I'm struggling with that. But it's allow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Allowing the journey, allowing yourself these places, allowing whatever it is to be, because God is big enough. And it's through these things that he absolutely, if we will just not lose sight, if we will just, you know, cling to him and say, I don't know. And even in the moments, like I said, for me, where I didn't want him to be my friend. I didn't want him to talk to me. I didn't want to talk to him. I was mad. I was like, how dare you? You know, you made a plus I felt like he made a fool of me.
Because you were saying she was going to be fit.
You know, so it's all of that, but it's allowing the journey.
Absolutely.
Whatever it looks like.
Absolutely.
And here you are learning to live. Learning to live again despite. And it's awesome and it's beautiful. And so we hope that you're encouraged with Vanessa's journey. You know, sometimes I'm hesitant to say our stories, because it makes it sound so minimal. You know, like, oh, it's just a story. No, it's like a journey, and it is our stories, but my goodness, there's so much in them, and so much that those moments, you know, I call them the despite moments, where you were just in it, and despite yourself, despite your emotions, despite your brain, despite what you feel, despite the moments, despite the people, that you continue to move. Because I know we've all had moments where we just want the world to stop. You know, we just want the world to stop for a second so we can take a breather. And unfortunately it doesn't. It keeps on going. Everybody else keeps on going around us, and we have to figure out how to get back on the carousel, right? Those, you remember when you were kids, that round merry-go-round, and you're pushing and you fall off and you're like, they won't stop it, and you're like, I gotta find a way to get back in. That's kind of how it is. So we hope you're encouraged. Thank you so much for sharing your life with us. And if you want to pray us out, I appreciate it.
Father, I just come to you and thank you for this day and just the opportunity to share Anton's story today, God. I know that you're continuing to be glorified through his life, even 3 years later, Lord. We look at hard things and, you know, because of the fall of man, like this is not our home and this is not the way things are supposed to be. And so it's okay that we're not okay with these things. And so I just pray that in the moments of weakness and in the moments of just not knowing how we're going to keep going, God, that you would just continue to carry us. Thank you that you are so big and so good and so gracious that you can deal with our emotions and you're not scared off by that. Thank you that you carry us and that you've brought us to this place of healing, but that we still remember our kids and we still mourn them and we still miss them. I just pray, God, for comfort and peace to everybody listening who's lost a baby or maybe going through a pregnancy that could be terminal, God. I just pray for peace and patience and joy in the midst of it, God, that they would make memories with their babies, and as they remember their babies and celebrate their lives, that you'd be glorified through that. We don't have to know all the answers. We don't have to know why, but we do trust you, God. And so I just pray that you'd continue to allow us to do that for your glory and for our good. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Yes, amen. You guys, thanks for joining us today.